So welcome to the first turn. I'm Hyena,
I'm Llama.
and today we're talking about mostly Age of Sigmar, I think, and painting. Big topics for the day.
Yeah.
Some stuff has happened this week for all kinds of things. Games Workshop, mostly on the fantasy side. Fantasy, I feel like, is gearing up for a big release. Big release window, a new edition, perhaps.
Essentially,
Army updates, army revamps, army expansions, new starter boxes, all kinds of stuff like this. So I have a little bit of inside information just because I'm privy to some of the GW product list.
Rumors.
And then there are rumors.
Yeah.
But I know this summer is supposed to be a big thing, big summer for AOS. Which is exciting. There are new Vanguard boxes coming out, or the equivalent, for existing armies that redo them and give you new stuff. We're coming to the end of the campaign for Dawnbringers. So if you haven't read the supplements, because they're expensive and you don't have them all, the story is progressing very quickly, and it's mostly trying to introduce new characters and new stuff, right? So we've got as part of this campaign, we've had a release of Usharan, the Mortarch of Delusion, which is the Flesh Eater Court king.
Yeah.
We have a new unit for Neve Black Talon, which came out a few weeks ago. We have the new unit for Callus and Toll that's coming out in a couple more weeks, which are very good, by the way. They might be on par with the Black Talon unit.
All characters, by the way, that you can see the stories for on Warhammer Plus.
Yep, super cool. So that's coming. They are up against a new Daughters of Cain character who's supposed to be split, call it, from Daughters of Cain proper. Right. She's more shadowy. She's more deceptive. She uses some of the same models and the same units in her little regiment of renown or army of renown from her supplement, but
Krethusa, the Crone Seer.
It seems to me like she's very similar to how Be'lakor operates as a Slave to Darkness leader, but isn't aligned with the goals, call it, of Archaon, the overall faction leader.
Right. The faction proper.
Got their own agendas, got their own, kind of thing, but still kind of work together. She seems a little bit like that. She's working with the Dawnbringer Crusades, who are launching, 2 separate crusades out to start new cities. Apparently they have succeeded at starting the cities. Very perilous places to start the cities, but strategic and monetary interests influence those decisions, But we know, and they told us before the first one came out, one of the cities is going to fail. Mm-hmm. We know that already. 2 cities go out, 2 are started, one of them is going to fail. So we'll have one new city, but the other one will go away. I'm wondering if it'll be a summer campaign where the players get to decide which one succeeds.
Oh, right.
It'll be one of those. Right. Similar to how they did the fate of Cadia, right? Wasn't that a campaign? Was deciding that? And
fall of Cadia.
Cadia fell as part of the story because that was how the campaign went, and Chaos won, so Cadia fell. I wonder if it's going to be something similar to that.
Right.
But there are a lot of factions involved in the 2 different cities. A lot of opponents on the field. In addition to the 2 cities, you also have Hammerhall, one of the major cities in the realms. One might say the biggest city in the realms, aside from Azir, the one in Azir, whatever the Stormcast's hometown is.
Right.
And it's interesting because there's so many different bad guys involved in this, and only like a couple of good factions. I call them good, but I mean like there's the Cities of Sigmar and Stormcast Eternals, or pretty much it, defending these cities. But there's Khorne Bloodbound sieging Hammerhall and winning. There's plots within the cities from the ghouls from the Flesh Eater Court, because they've infiltrated and kind of spread the ghoul madness through fine wines. There are always Skaven in the sewers, not unlike Audiugs.
Unlike Audiugs, always in the sewer.
And then it's just a mess. There's so many players in kind of in play at the moment. So we'll see probably the resolution of that here this summer, I would say.
And there have been a series of short stories, like a couple dozen of them now, right? That you can read for free on the Warhammer community site that sort of gives you insight into all that's going on. Really neat. And so, if there's a big summer thing coming for it, it could either be like that, a campaign event where the world's involved and the player results determine what happens next, and or potentially bridging us into a new edition of the game or another new season at least.
But the inside info that I had seen was, like I said, those new starter boxes that they're coming out with probably this summer. And then in terms of, vendor communications, they said, would you like to know more about Age of Sigmar in the future in terms of products being offered? So sounds like they're going to be gearing up to do something rather large. We also know that the Darkoath sub-army, call it, for Slaves of Darkness was both leaked and then revealed proper. I'm sure they were forced to do that. They weren't planning on doing that. Or maybe they were planning on doing it. Maybe they were going to do it Monday, because they seem to be revealing models Mondays and Thursdays is kind of the days they're showing off new stuff.
And it had leaked because they meant to show us the the character unit, which was again based off an episode of Hammer and Bolter on Warhammer Plus.
And with a new book coming out too.
With a new book. And the video, they accidentally showed everything that was coming for the Darkoath, and the nerds among us were not going to allow that to go unclipped, and they clipped it, and now it's there forever. Now what excites me is you and I for a couple of years now have talked about how in the Slaves to Darkness they got really cool updates, but the old Marauders line, the old Warhammer Fantasy, Marauders on foot and Marauders on horse and all that stuff was very outdated, didn't really fit with the new aesthetic or theme, and then we've seen this stuff in stories and an animation of how cool the Darkoath are. It's like, wow, I really wish they'd expand on that and make that the human line.
Because the Darkoath are not Marauders.
Right.
They're not the Chaos Marauders.
Although the soldiers on foot are called Darkoath Marauders.
I know they are, which is confusing.
Yeah.
But they have Darkoath in there.
Yeah. They're not Norskin.
Exactly. Which is what the old Marauders look like. They are Viking helmeted, flails, for some reason just pants.
Yep.
No shirts, but they live in the north. Up in the Arctic, basically.
Muscles. Yeah.
It's bizarre. So I'm glad that they are separating those. I'm sure they will continue to be released for the old world.
Yep.
For the factions of Chaos from there.
Armies, the Warriors of Chaos in old world will be there,
which is fine. But now they're differentiating off the art style and story aesthetics. For these units to be in AOS proper, and they looked great.
Yeah,
that was the thing. That was another thing. They looked phenomenal.
And it covered. It was like we just need them to do infantry, the horsemen,
a couple characters.
Yeah, and they did all of that.
Throw in an extra monster to
and they gave us the monster, which they explained a little of the story of those things. It's like it's one of the devoted sort of becomes that, and then in order to keep it satiated, they have to offer it sacrifices. And, and then the infantry make a couple different versions. They can either have spears or hand weapons. Perfect.
Pretty standard.
It's exactly what I wanted.
And
I haven't purchased Marauders yet.
They look exactly like the Warcry war bands. Yeah. The Darkoath, whatever, from Warcry. They look exactly like that.
Super excited for that box.
It's great. Except they have command squad. They have a champion. They've got a musician. They've got a banner. So...
Yeah,
neat.
And so that I'm excited for. Thankfully, it's not going to come out before Adepticon. Don't want to spend that money ahead of time.
Absolutely.
And then like they did with the Iron Jaws, they're going to give us a free PDF supplement to show us what the updated rules are.
The box set will likely contain a paper version of it, so you don't have to worry about that, which is also good.
Yeah,
I like having a physical thing, even especially if I don't have to buy it separate. So that is nice. And then we had heard / seen some photos of things like Skaven weapon teams, Skaven artillery.
Yeah.
So,
which that's another one we've been wondering about for a long time. Is
for sure.
If and when they've got a big update coming.
Yep. And so like the model we had seen was a sprue of some kind of mix between a weapon team on foot with a chariot, with a doom wheel, with a weapon platform, something.
It was unmistakably.
Oh yeah.
Skaven.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there were rats. I mean, there were clearly rats pushing to something.
Yeah, and it's the size of an item that is clearly not meant for like Warcry or Underworlds.
Right.
And it's not goofy enough to be Blood Bowl.
Right.
So it's like this is clearly Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, it's great. And that makes me wonder, like, what is coming next, right? Like, we've seen that, and it's like, okay, well, that was a neat thing to leak. What else you got? I want to know more. I was doing some digging, and there are rumor mongers, call them. There are rumor mongers out there who think/know things. I'm of the opinion that some of it is just wish listing because it's like easy guesses. What's old? What needs to be replaced? But this set of rumors doesn't make me terribly happy because it seems odd. So if it's true, it's a little odd. Any kind of updates are great. I will throw that out there.
Multiple kits.
Right. But just like the scale of like what the refresh is going to be is like absurd to me. Right. So I'm gonna read off the list of things real quick.
As a disclaimer, I remember seeing something similar prior to 40K 10th coming out about Tyranids. And
also one about Eldar.
Yeah, and the rumor list of the models Tyranids were getting ended up absurdly big. Now, here's the thing. A lot of them ended up true, but there was a whole smattering of others that were just wish listing made up stuff. Yep. And so it's hard.
I mean, if you say everything is getting updated and then some of it gets updated, you're partially right, I guess.
Right. And they were correct about some new things. They just didn't have like names right or what they were going to be functionally. But with that said, take it with a grain of salt. Yep. All the salt you want.
This was the list of things that were going to be changed, new, updated, removed.
For the little rat people.
These are the things that are going to be removed. Plague sensor bearers.
Okay.
These I made a pause right there. This might be the best performing unit in the Skaven army currently.
Yeah, and the strongest versions of the list.
Yeah,
that are carrying
the plague
their
sensors
tournament value
are the MVPs of the army. Supposedly getting removed. Rat swarms, I'm okay with. Whatever. Pain in the ass, you can't get them. I don't care. Giant rats. They were bits on other sprues. You had to cobble together to make 6-man units. I don't care. Yeah. Giant rats can go.
Sure.
Gutter runners. Cutting the gunner runners, which I believe are the metal ones. The night runners are the plastic.
Yeah.
They're kind of like yeah. So if they combine gutter runners, night runners into one kit, I'm fine with that. That's fine. If they make them sort of elite, you don't have two versions, you just have one.
And then AOS
get rid of the old one.
Yeah. So they're slightly different. Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like they're getting a new kit. They might use the old one.
Oh.
But then combine the rules into one unit and use those models. Because they are still technically plastic.
Just to dump the metal.
They're just kind of bad. So those are the 4 units that are supposedly going away. Okay, fine. Sensor bearers are weird. Okay, fine. Refresh, and this one is insane to me. The Grey Seer, who has a blister pack, decent plastic model. Also comes on the Screaming Bell.
Yep.
So if you want to make
that still exists.
Plague Priest or the other one, like you get one. The Warlock, which fine. The Warlock is a metal kit with like scissors, whatever. That's fine. There was a plastic Warlock in the Island of Blood box.
Yep.
Who had a pistol and a halberd.
Correct.
So I have multiple of that one.
But as we've seen, the Isle of Blood models have all become like myth and legend.
Yes, indeed. Even though plastic. A Master Molder. Okay. We don't have one of them. The old one is Throughout the Unclean, who's got the 2 arms and the weird pot belly. Like, awful model. Yep. Sure. New Master Molder. Fine. Clan Rats. Okay. New plastic Clan Rats is weird.
They're oldish.
They are from 2012.
No.
So
Storm Vermin are a little newer than that, right?
That many years ago. They're kind of monopose.
Yep.
Bodies. Put on the shield, put on the weapon.
Yep.
They're passable though.
They are.
Storm Vermin, new kit.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting. I wouldn't mind an aesthetic update just because they are a little like they're meant to be rank and file. Is the way they're posed. Sure. All weapon teams.
Well, those all need it, or we need new weapons entirely.
Again, we had some Island of Blood plastic ones that went away.
Fire thrower,
the Warp Fire Thrower is an old metal one. The Globadier one is gone. The Rattling Gun is an old metal one. The Warp Grinder.
Yep.
So technically the Jezzails I don't think is considered weapon team. But they are supposed to be getting refreshed anyway. That's the next thing. Jezzails. The Globadiers, which are metal models.
Yep.
And then Rat Ogres, metal models. Yep. So that was just basically listing off all the metal models.
Either going away or getting a refresh.
Exactly. That to me feels like a very easy guess, right?
I'll say this. If I were to venture a guess, whenever Skaven gets their next update, I think they will decide that anything that is metal will not be coming forward. Now, whether or not that means all of those are getting plasticked,
Right.
or we're going to get something totally new, a la some of the stuff we saw for Seraphon or whatever. That's complete conjecture.
Right.
But I wouldn't be surprised if they just don't want anything that's metal, finecast, whatever, going forward in AOS.
Which I'm fine with.
They're close to the whole line being plastic anyway.
You're right.
So...
and so that is everything that exists now.
Okay.
What's happening with it? The ones that are going away, the ones that are being refreshed into a new kit, new stuff. So if you look at it here again, Cut 4, we've got a new Gracier, a new Warlock, new Molder, new Clan Rats, new Storm Vermin, new weapon teams. Maybe it's the same kit. Makes all 4 weapon teams.
Things. Sure.
But that's 5 kits so far. Jezzail's, Globadiers, Rat Ogres. 9 new kits there. Okay. A new Warlock. So a refresh the Warlock and then a new type of Warlock. Okay. So, like how they had the Warlock Bombardier that had the rocket launcher?
Right.
Technically a Warlock wasn't the same thing as the old Warlock. Maybe they mean it's an Arch Warlock as a new Warlock, because the old Arch Warlock is metal. It could claw.
Yep.
So if they had a new Arch Warlock, that would be fine. Maybe that's what they mean. Maybe. A new Plastic Warlord kit, which, okay, the old one's fine, but we could use a new one to lead the new Clan Rats and Storm Vermin. Fine. All right. New Vermin Lord.
Nope.
Mind blown. Are you kidding me? New Vermin Lord? That kit's not that old. It looks amazing. It makes 4 Vermin Lords. You telling me a new one to make more Vermin Lords?
Right.
Or either to replace that one. Doesn't sound like it's replacing it. But to make more? Technically, yes, there isn't a Vermin Lord of Clan Molder, and there isn't a Vermin Lord of Clan Scryer.
Right.
But another one... Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. A new artillery piece, which may be the one we've seen.
Yep, that could totally
be.
Yep.
And then a new behemoth of some kind, a new monster.
Okay.
So like a Hill Pit.
Or a Brood Horror equivalent.
Maybe. And then a unit called Wolf Rats.
All right.
Which they had from Forge World before.
Yep.
There's a precedent for that.
Yep.
They were fast-moving, kind of hard-hitting. Not really cavalry, but it fit the role of cavalry. You know what I mean? Wolf Rats.
How would they release this?
Yeah. I don't know. And then after showing the leak unit, it mentioned more. A new Arch Warlock, another Warlock Engineer, and then a unit called a Galvanier with warp... Galvanier with Warp Volt Obliterators.
Okay.
An alternate name, the Hyper Warp Rattling Cannonade, which I think that's the platform we have seen the sprue for.
Well, and that last one had a name so particular that it could be a real thing.
Galvanier on Warp Volt Obliterator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But if you add all that up, that's like 16 new kits.
Yeah, so
that's way too much.
Yeah. So
that is I must hunt out. That's bullshit. Yeah, that's too much stuff.
It's like, so I could see if that sprue leak that we've seen is some sort of artillery piece, and like the Screaming Bell, or like the Warp Fire Thrower, or the Plague Claw Catapult. The artillery piece itself makes a couple different things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the character or regular rat that you put on there can be a guy on foot or on... So that one might cover 3 or 4 things.
You're right. Yep.
The other thing that could cover a lot is if they do like this Darkoath box or like the Seraphon box, they release a box set way ahead of the army that's got 5 of the kits in there that you can only get in that box first.
Yep.
And they're probably kind of push-fitty.
I'm trying to do the math.
But the rest of it, the other...
9?
Yeah.
I'm trying to do the math with Age of Sigmar got a huge refresh.
Yeah.
That was a big refresh.
It was.
But it was only, let's see, Horseman, character on foot with his little retinue guy. You had the unit of characters. Mm-hmm. You had the Lady of the Wheel. Yep. I forgot her name. Pontifex, whatever. Mm-hmm. You had the Behemoth Manticore lady.
Yep.
The leader. You had the Rifleman. So that's 6. You had the Steel Helms, the Shieldsman. 7. You had the Ogre. 8. New Cavalry.
You already said the Horseman.
Oh, the Cavalry Hero.
Oh,
so the Cavalry Hero and the Cavalry.
Yep.
That's 9.
Okay.
I'm missing Cannon. 10. Was there one more? There might have been one more.
I don't know.
The Warp Forger, the new wizard.
Yeah.
With the pot of metal.
Who everybody's painted, and it looks great.
11. So that was 11 kits there.
You could do it.
Flesh Eater Court's got a bucket. Yep. They got 6 new characters.
Mm-hmm.
There was 5 new types of courtiers that they got.
Well, and one way they can also do it is if you do a squad of characters for the Skaven, you restructure the way their army works. Yeah. You could have one box be 5 characters, and all of a sudden that's how you get 5 releases in one. Again, the artillery piece having 3 ways it can build. So maybe they're going to pull this off.
Yeah, so we said 16 kits. We weren't talking about 16 units because
Right.
Each of the 5 weapon teams is a different kit or different unit technically. It's just that's wild to me.
It would be big.
Yeah.
And there could be some trimmed out of that where there's just stuff that's gone and doesn't get an equivalent.
Yeah. Another person recapped it with about the same, except he added in that Queek Headtaker's coming back.
Why?
Also, how? I thought he died. Didn't he die in a duel in the end times?
Pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure he was killed by like Balagar Ironhammer.
I think Thanquil's the only named guy who survived.
I think so. Yeah. Because it was both Deathmaster Snickage got killed by a dwarf, and then I'm pretty sure Queek died in a duel, killed the dwarf, got killed by a different dwarf. Snickage comes in from the top rope, finishes him off. Another dwarf comes in and finishes him off. It was that kind of thing. But I'm pretty sure almost all the Skaven characters were like, the named characters were killed off, except for Queek. Not Queek. Thanquil. Yeah, what we just said. Really weird. I don't know. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know if I can buy any of it. Because it's too much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised if they made a new named guy who's AOS relevant, why not? They do that for everybody now, it seems. So I wouldn't be surprised if Skaven gets a big one that resembles Cities of Sigmar in the sense that all the human-sized stuff was smaller, and maybe that lends itself to it. Skaven stuff's even smaller.
No.
Rats?
They aren't, though. That's the thing, is if you look at the scale of like a Skaven...
But how would they do it now?
They would do it the same size as people.
With their hyper-detailed,
I mean, they're hunched over, but a Skaven is about the same size as a person. So, like, I mean, it's still... You could pack those sprues with pieces.
That's what I'm saying. Because they can do them finer now.
Yeah.
And so, just like with... When they did this last run of Astra Militarum humans, they were so much skinnier than the old bulky ones, but yet looked way better. Yeah. And so they can pack those sprues. And so maybe it'll be easy for them to do this. It would be a monstrous release for them. Well,
if it ends up being a starter box, 2-person starter box kind of thing, for the launch of, say, 4th edition, which we're speculating might be this summer.
Right.
Because if it's gearing up, it's going to be big. What's bigger than a new edition release?
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll pull more people into it, because I still think rolling for initiative per battle round still drives a lot of people away.
Yep.
Still.
And I think instead of embracing it as part of the game, there's so many people who are just not used to that being a thing in any game system that one thing won't let them push past it and just play the game.
It can be a little swingy.
It can.
But then it usually swings back. Like, I don't know.
I think they don't like forced swingy is why.
I feel like most times that you get double turned, as people call it, it isn't as impactful as they make it out. No. Right? Because you are usually fighting in combat alternating.
Yep.
And so you still get pretty much your full army to fight.
And unlike Warhammer 40k, it's truly alternating combat. It's not like, well, everyone who charged gets to go first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You generally get better positioning if you charge. You get better like priority. Like you get to set up the charges and the positioning how you want to, which is an advantage. But the double turn really only incentivizes movement positioning, like in terms of an advantage, right? Like you get to move further across the board, which then kind of traps your opponent. So like that is a big deal. Yeah. It does help you win the game for sure. But it's not like, well, you got 2 turns in a row, you just blew my army off the board. It's like usually it doesn't happen like that, unless you're playing a shooting heavy army,
right? And
you get the double turn against your opponent, and they're in range for both volleys.
Yep, that's awful.
Then it's like, okay, well that was devastating. You didn't get to do anything. You got to move turn 1. I got to shoot you 2 full rounds of shooting.
Yeah, and so when we engage,
game can be over.
And but they do try to put things in place to grant scoring and defensive opportunities to the player who didn't get the double. But it's funny that's a big hang up for so many people, because what is one thing you hear about in any other game? Well, my opponent got to go first, so I was playing from behind the whole time. So which is worse then?
Right. So yeah, exactly. What's worse? Them going first because they deployed fewer units.
Right.
So they get to guarantee go. Yeah. Oh, is 40k random still?
But
I don't remember. I don't remember if 40k is random, if you random after deployment or not.
Well, but the thing is, most other games are random, or there's something similar where there's a metric in the whatever you deployed that determines.
But the point remains, are if you roll that 50-50 to determine whether you go first or not, or your opponent goes first or not, and they win on turn 1, you have a 50-50 chance of losing, right? In that type of game. Whereas in this, it's like, oh, well, the double turn. It's like, well, yeah, the double turn, you have a better than average chance of not getting double turned because you win the ties. Like, you still have your opponent doesn't have a great chance of double turning you. They have to beat you. You win all ties and you go first if you have to choose to go first if you win the roll-off.
Yep.
So it's like, I feel like you have less of a chance of getting screwed with the double turn than if your opponent just went first and blew you off the board turn 1. Yep. It's just, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird to think about. It's a weird mentality about it.
So in other games, like chess, there used to be a meme before there were memes that used to say, "Dear gaming gods, white is OP, signed black," and it was because white gets to go first in the game, and they always felt like that put one of the two players in that dynamic on the offensive versus the defensive. And then there's something that you see in even sports, like so in tennis they'll do a coin flip to see who gets to serve first. And they say that's always an advantage in that first set getting out to 1-0 lead, because then the other person always has to get 2 in a row to break.
Mm-hmm.
And in a game like this, like Warhammer 40K rather, or any other game where it's like 50-50 who goes first, and then the person who loses, that's one of the first things if they're not hyper professional player, the first thing they'll complain about is, well, my opponent went first, so they were always first to everything. And then this, it's like, well, now you have a chance if your opponent goes first for you to get 2 steps in a row.
Mm-hmm.
So like, isn't that a way to negate the going second? And like you pointed out, because the tie goes to the whatever, there's not even that high of a chance of the double turn happening anymore. And it certainly isn't going to happen to you twice in a game. Because if it happens to you bottom 1, top of 2, you would have to then know earlier than, like, the odds of that happening again would be
so in order for it to happen to you twice, they would need to get bottom 1, top of 2. Yep. You would need to then get bottom of 2, top of 3, and then they get double turn again.
Right. Which would have to mean you had a double turn.
3 into 4, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is your comeback turn.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's just interesting. It's interesting. That's all.
And maybe they'll consider it. Maybe they'll consider it.
And that might be a big thing. Is that if it's such a stressor for so many people, maybe it is something they'll consider just getting rid of.
Yeah. Because they've tried mitigating it in ways, and maybe people just won't ever acknowledge that.
Yeah.
That nuance, and just decide we just want a regular you go, I go. But the alternating combat leads to an interesting discussion about what if they did alternating activations in general.
Yep.
AOS, I feel, has a better setup for doing that than 40K. I think 40K is too we've talked about that. I think it's too unwieldy to do that. But like with AOS, you might be able to. You have slightly fewer units. They're more like modules. It's like character, unit, whatever, and they all are doing a thing together. And so I could see alternating activations happening like that. And since there's so much less shooting,
Oh, there's also simplified stat cards.
Simplified
right?
stats,
Where I'm not having to worry about comparing stats to one another, even though I would like that for some granularity purposes.
Yep.
You're all just looking at your own sheet and you know what you hit and wound on.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to like compare what's my guns.
Right.
The only thing that you have to compare is, well, what's my penalty to your save and what is your save.
Right.
Like that's the only really thing. So yeah, I don't know. You don't have to worry about damage spell number because damage all spells. So you don't have to worry about like allocating wounds correctly to kill off models. It is faster. So alternating could potentially work.
Yeah.
You don't strike back. You only activate on your alternating turns.
Right. And then, and then in games where they do have alternating activations, turn structure is different. But then I could see that being a way that they don't have to worry about that whole thing. Even said, if it were a traditional you go, I go, AOS, because it doesn't have as much long range lethality, the top of 1 wouldn't feel as overwhelming, or whoever gets the first shooting phase. That said, we don't know much more about what they mean by a big thing this summer.
We just know it's gearing up.
Which I'm fine because it's my favorite of the two.
There are a couple of really cool things that they are doing with this year's campaign though. Is they're introducing like modules and ways to play. So like currently there is 3 ways to play. Most people play, which I assume I hear about most people playing at least, matched play. Matched play is the go-to format for pretty much any tabletop game, right? It's highly regulated. It's the most fair and balanced. It receives updates. No matter who you're playing against, they're probably playing matched play too, or intending to. So you can find pickup games, right? Easy. That being said, I think it has problems because balance is difficult.
Yep.
So you can change and tweak things, trying to balance them, and ruin stuff. Make things no longer good anymore. Make things too good. Price things out of the game because you can't figure out how to balance them. We see this happen all the time. Mm-hmm. And that feels bad as like a model collector. If like you like a unit, but for some reason it got changed and now it doesn't make sense to bring it anymore because it's not good enough.
And yeah.
Right. That being said, open play is too Wild West. Mm-hmm. Narrative play is too much work. Like call it that way. So like match play is the go-to. But in these campaigns, what they've been doing is introducing a couple more ways to play that are even more out there. One of them they did was an old rule set that they used to have back in Fantasy called Triumph and Treachery, which allows you to do more than 2 people in a single game. Mm-hmm. And balance out to prevent you as a like shooty army from just like shooting everyone at the same time and annihilating everyone's army. You could only kind of impact specific units at a time. You have to like choose one army to like focus your efforts against for a phase or for, a combat or something. And so like you don't get, even though you have, 3 armies in range, you don't get to attack them all. You have to like limit yourself and only attack one or the other. So it's like, it's a nice little like sort of way to balance out like a multiplayer game. I mean, technically 2 is multi, but mm-hmm. More than 2 people in one game. It's always hard to do. It's at least interesting. There won't be like competitive formats with it. That's not going to happen. But it's at least interesting. And then the second way to play they're doing is introducing battle plans and rules for terrain that allow you to do sieges.
Sieges, yep.
Which I think is super cool. Because like I have so much terrain that I can make like forts and like castles out of that it just kind of doesn't really work. You'd have to like make up so many new rules to make it function the way.
In AOS, it's kind of a terrain light game. Yeah. It's more of an open battlefield.
It's terrain light and it's terrain like light.
Right.
Like there's little terrain, but like the rules for the terrain are also very minimal.
Yep.
There are, when they say something, like how do you deal with getting up and over a building? Well, they say, oh, well, you can stop anywhere. Just climb up it.
Yep.
It's like, okay. So I have a 10-inch tall wall, which is huge in miniature size. Right. A 10-foot wall is like 30 feet high. Like that, 50 feet high, whatever it is. And I'm trying to climb up this thing as a unit that only moves 5 inches. They're like, well, how do I do that? I can't move far enough to go over it. It's like, oh, well, just consider your unit having climbed 5 inches up and stopping right there in the middle. That's weird. That's a weird way to do that. And so like units don't get slowed down by terrain. You just move along the edge of it as much as you want to. And then as far as you can go and you just stop. Like that's kind of how that game works. Yep. And so like things like castle walls and stuff in this game just, they don't feel right because I can just, a wall is supposed to keep people out. You're not supposed to be able to climb it without special equipment or destroying it or sneaking under it or through it or whatever. Just being able to straight up walk up it and over it is like, doesn't really feel right without things like ladders or siege towers or something, But this kind of helps make that sort of scenario work by having things that give you bonuses on the field and are things that they're impassable but they're destroyable. They've got wound characteristics. They've got like these different buildings that have like 30 wounds on them. You just got to go attack the building and destroy it.
And I think for match play where the focus is supposed to just be about like the units, I'm fine with terrain rules being ultra simple.
Correct.
We've said that forever about Warhammer 40K. They try so hard to make them complicated that it ends up a problem.
Yeah.
But now, what if you want to play, Battle of Minas Tirith style, where you're assaulting a giant fortress? Mm-hmm. Like, you need rules for that. You need the walls to matter. You need defense towers, and you need all that. So I think it's cool that they're coming up with a way to play that in Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, and it's like official rules. It's not just made up ones, house rules, whatever. Which, if I'm playing that kind of a format, which is basically homebrew / narrative play, mm-hmm. I'm not going to 100% follow what's published and printed anyway. I'm going to make things up that make sense because like it won't be perfect.
Yeah.
But you can kind of make it up yourself. No one's going to kick down your door and say, "Hey, you're not playing it right."
Yep.
Like,
oh, it's happening.
That's the ultimate thing here is we are playing games in private. We're basing it on rules that the community generally agrees on, but you don't have to. We've said that before with like, well, I like 7th edition 40K. It's like, we'll go play 7th edition 40K. You have the books, you got the supplements, you got the codex. Go play 7th edition then.
People in your group or whatever who do it.
Go do that. You don't need to play 10th then if you don't like 10th. Go play 7th. Go have fun. I liked 8th edition fantasy. Go play that. You can still do it.
Yep.
They're even releasing the models again for you. Go buy the models and go play 8th again if that's what you like. So, little rant aside. Play how you want. Make it fun. Yep. That kind of thing. I like narrative personally because I like giving a person the opportunity to have something of their own, whether it's a character or some kind of decision that they made in a campaign mattered, and so they have a special boon or bonus, something that makes it like personalized. I feel like there's much more connection with your army than just being like, well, it was this many points. So I wanted to play this faction. It was this many points. This was optimal. It's like, yeah, you're right, but
and you can, when people really run it, you can have a map set up and you're seeing progress, and so it feels like you're playing a grand strategy kind of game. And yeah, I'm glad that there's all these ways to play for people, but that's just it. Whatever people don't like, then play it a way you do like.
Exactly.
Just know that if you plan to if you're going to go to an event to play in the event of a certain edition and rule set of the game, manage your expectations. That's what you're going to play.
Yep. So I've got a couple of narrative events that I'm going to be playing at Adepticon this year, which is 2 weeks away.
2 weeks.
Oh my god.
2 weeks from now. We will
2
be
weeks. I know. Oh my god. It's too soon. Push it back. Just push it back. It's too soon.
Not excited?
I am very excited. But I'm in 2 narrative events that I'm excited about playing. One of them is one I play every year. It's just it's a 1,000-point narrative. Path to Glory with no expansion. You only lose things.
Yeah.
Your army only gets whittled down. It doesn't grow. And then there's this Hero Hammer sort of event where you make an adventuring party of 5 heroes, and you battle through a gauntlet of scenarios of just fighting enemies with just heroes. Super cool. I think, thinking about it right now, there are changes I would make. I haven't even played it, but I've looked at the source material for what it's based on, and there's already things I would change, right? It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be within limits, but still open-ended. So the one of the supplements a couple years ago, they introduced a way to create your own hero called the Anvil of Apotheosis.
Right.
And then since then, they had all kinds of other things like that for other factions. So the Anvil of Apotheosis was for Stormcast. You can make your own Stormcast hero. But then they had the Crypt of Apotheosis, the Crypt of Customization, whatever, for vampires. And so every faction kind of had their own mini rule set to build your own character with certain point allowances. Basically stat points that you could allocate to a template to make a custom hero. And so there are restrictions for what you're allowed to do with your character. So you have to be within the 20-point limit or whatever they set to make a hero, and then you can play it in this event. You can bring your own character and kit bash them, and I'm all over that. Mm-hmm. I'm all over that.
Yeah.
However, if you bring a character who is just a generic one, they still have rules on their sheet that says things like, well, friendly Ironjaw's unit within this many inches gets this benefit. Well, if you're playing an Ironjaw's character and you don't have an Ironjaw's ally, your rule is completely wasted because you don't have a target because of the keyword restrictions.
Yep.
So in this kind of an event, I think what I would do as a game master for it would say anything that specifies friendly faction unit, get rid of the faction, right? Just cut the faction keyword out. If it specifically says friendly Ironjaw's Ardboys unit with it, yeah, okay, it's gotta be an Ardboys unit. You can't just give that to a hero because you couldn't normally give that to a hero in your army anyway. Mm-hmm. Or things like that. So you can actually have abilities that affect your allies in this pickup game where you're just hodgepodging together 5 heroes. I'd like for them to be able to impact one another. Mm-hmm. And give each other commands and buffs and whatever. Or if I'm a Stormcast and I have this lantern that heals, but it says target Stormcast unit, and he's just alone with a bunch of vampires and stuff. It's well, I can't use my rule for anybody because I can't use my healing lantern on a friendly because there are no Stormcast. Well, maybe that lantern can affect friends, not just Stormcast. That requirement is for balance purposes for matched play games.
Right.
But because this is a narrative event, he's going to bend his own rules a little bit and use his healing magic to heal an Ideneth Deepkin hero or a high elf hero, or a witch or something, to like use the healing magic on them to help himself survive. You know what I mean? So I think I would make that change right off the bat anyway. Just be like, heroes can affect other heroes with their generic abilities that say faction unit. Friendly faction unit can get this buff. I would allow that. But I'm thinking about how this goes, actually running some of these events at our store. Mm-hmm. Thinking about doing this exact thing to get people interested in it, to get people introduced to it. And that's a change I would make to make it fun. Have like a character selection screen of 16 different heroes. Here's like a box with 16 models, and then there's a stat card underneath each one that they can like come up and just pick your thing and play with it.
Yep.
That kind of deal. I'm excited for that. I kind of want to do that. But I could kind of do that with Warcry too. Warcry is another game that is like, it's super interesting to me, and I've got so much of it.
Yep.
But like, I just haven't played it that much.
Nope.
So much so that like, I don't even know the current rules you need.
Right.
I played it back when it was edition 1. I think it's in the 3rd edition technically of Warcry.
Right.
But like, there are compendiums for like bringing models. There are compendiums for like the different armies. There are compendiums for like adding a mercenary like character to your warband. And there are all kinds of rules like this, and it's like, I need to go do some research and figure out like what the comprehensive list of all of the source material I would need to play right now.
Well, and that might be a game that gets some people on the fence in, because a lot of times with that you can start with just a box of dudes and then play. Yeah. And that's attractive to people if that's the starting point.
Yeah.
And then they'll collect what they want,
And then most of those units are usable in a proper army anyway.
Yep.
So it's like you're not wasting the thing, because you can play them in your army when you expand it. No problem. But yeah, so AOS out of the way. Those are the things I'm excited about. Summer campaign wrapping up. Two of my factions that I enjoy getting updated.
Yep.
That's fantastic to me. We don't know who the Skaven would be fighting against, by the way. Probably Stormcast. Stormcast have kicked off the last 3 editions in a starter box. They will probably kick off this one as well.
Yep.
Which I'm fine with, because I collect Stormcast. It's fine with me.
Why not? A whole new chamber.
Yeah. There also was a Meta Watch they released, by the way, today as well.
They did.
Which I had forgotten about.
Yeah.
Well, briefly, I mean, there wasn't a lot of information.
No.
So we can breeze over this. Almost every army is in the sweet zone still, 45 to 55. Win rate, right?
Pretty impressive.
The only one that's above it is Age of Sigmar, which is odd, because the only real changes they got were point increases and rules taken away. So they got better with
56%.
56, and it's just barely outside.
Yep.
And
they said they're going to keep watching that because they think the trend is that they're coming down.
Yeah.
But one thing they noted on the community site that I found interesting ties in a little bit with what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. We see this expansion, or rather update, to Slaves to Darkness. They talked about what they did for Ironjaws, and then they mentioned stuff like Skaven and Seraphon.
Mm-hmm.
And these armies all have like books with a lot of units, but then they've kind of performed at the lower half for a lot of the edition.
Mm-hmm.
And points that hasn't been enough. And so this revision to things like Darkoath, they said, is possibly more of like what you'll expect to see. And so that could be another thing that points to Skaven.
That'd be super cool.
Maybe just losing a bunch of the old and getting totally AOS newish stuff. But like, they need to do maybe supplements to update the armies, not just...
They also mentioned that they wanted to look at the internal balance of the armies that have lots of units, because we talk about that all the time. Space Marines is my go-to example.
You can have 200 units, but if only 5 of them are useful, like,
and the rest of it sucks, and those 5 units aren't great.
Right.
And then the army sucks. It's like, we have all these options. What's the problem? They're all bad. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But they were pointing out the fact that there are a handful of armies that have a lot of units to choose from, but they do this exact thing. There's bad internal balance.
And Slaves was one of those.
Slaves of Darkness
Seraphim,
was one.
They talked about
Seraphim, especially the coalesced Seraphim, which are the ones I like, which are the actual living feral sort of dinosaurs. Not the Dream edition of the dinosaurs. Sylvaneth is another one. Sylvaneth is another army that's like, there's a lot of options, but man, they're not good options. Mostly, that could probably be fixed with points, honestly. Their points are like 40% too high. Well, like they're crazy high.
And that's
points.
Gravy for everyone. If it's just like you read rules on a unit, it's like the rules are good. I can't play it because of the points.
Right.
And That's nice when that's all it takes. But when they have to do a more critical analysis and like, what can we do to make it so 2/3 of these units are playable instead of just like have a goal to bite. But that also means they are looking at it that way.
Yeah.
That they know they can't just do points forever to fix everything.
Yeah, so they gave 2 lists. They gave 2 lists of 5 armies that they're looking to do other things with. First one is to earmark them for future changes, which is what we were talking about with maybe tweaking their some of their rules on their data sheets, some of their army rules, some of their things that aren't just points, right? And that was the one we were talking about, the two of the orc factions, Iron Jaws, Cruel Boys, Sylvaneth, Seraphim, and Slaves of Darkness. And then they also said that the internal balance for 5 of the largest armies is going to be targeted in the future. It will be targeted in the future. And those were Cities of Sigmar, there's a lot of units, Stormcast Eternals, there's 38 heroes. There are more heroes in that army than every other army in the game has units.
Yep.
There are more heroes. Slaves of Darkness, again. Seraphim, again. And then Soulblight Gravelords. So Seraphim and Slaves of Darkness both need army changes and internal balance changes. And it's like, I completely agree with that. I don't want just points tweaks.
Yep.
Like, Space Marines right now is going through a points tweak extravaganza.
Yep.
Where they're just lowering points for Space Marines over and over again. It's like, you're not fixing them.
Well, and with stuff like, I don't know much about the Seraphim Battle Tome, but I know with Slaves to Darkness, we have felt that since they came out, their rules were kind of mediocre, and it's been reflected in that even when they were brand new, they just weren't winning. They were hanging around 48%.
Well, I'm hoping the Darkoath change is going to help them. Maybe that'll give them a limited amount of shooting. Maybe some short range thrown axes and javelins, whatever. That'd be nice. Some speed. Yep. Trading in some durability for speed, but keeping the punch. Right, like I could see that happening with, especially the new Darkoath, like Horse Masters.
Yep.
Right, if they're hard hitting, fast shock cavalry, but they're very squishy, that could get the job done without needing to be like very expensive Chaos Knights who are more tanky than they are damage output.
Yep.
So,
and when you try to make their output or the durability of a unit in a way that's just boring, that's based on minuses and pluses, like it doesn't feel like they do much. But I'll be interested to see what this is. That could be a part of these big changes in the set. They might wait for a new edition to be like, boom, big changes to these armies.
But they could even do like big changes to how you score in a new edition, right? Because I know a lot of people complain about the secondary missions for a lot of armies are wildly imbalanced compared to one another because you don't have a universal set of secondaries.
Right.
Some secondaries or even primaries too, for some armies are just so easy to accomplish compared to someone else. Like, I was thinking through the Stormcast Eternal ones, and they are impossible to accomplish. they are. Like, one of them is literally, you need to kill their general with your general. Yeah, that's your primary mission.
Never gonna happen.
It's like never going to happen. Yeah. One of them is, you need to contest both enemy objectives with coalition units from Cities of Sigmar. It's like, what are you? Not a chance. Like, that's never going to happen. Yeah. Like, they're just very specific things they try to like get you to do based on like the rules for building your army. Yeah. That were like, these are way too specific. If I cannot build an army that can accomplish all of these in the same list.
Well, and then still be relevant elsewhere in the game.
Exactly.
And we know that for stuff like objectives, it's better to have a universal set that everyone has to try to do.
Right.
And you try to leave out ones that no armies can participate in.
Yeah.
Like. So that'll be nice to see if they consider that, and that can go a long way.
Yeah.
You change the objectives, and all of a sudden armies that are having trouble winning might go up a few percentage points. But it'll be neat to see what that does, how that affects the game all around.
Yeah.
On the hobby side, speaking of Adepticon coming up, I saw something trending on social media. Let me know if you saw this. People were passing it around, and it was a quote about how, I don't remember who said it, and I'm paraphrasing.
I don't remember what it was. I don't remember who said it, but here it is.
But they pointed out that in other art mediums, like traditional oil painting or sculpture or whatever, things like that, throughout human history, we have valued impressionistic designs or elements that appear illustrative or that you can tell there's a human touch, that it's not perfect, but that's actually a part of the art itself.
So you're thinking like when you use oil paints and you leave the dabs of it, the globs of it to dry, and
it forms a physical texture.
It's a fixture. Yeah, okay.
And then, or you see someone doing an impression of light pouring into a room.
Ooh, look at me, I'm light.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
Just
sorry.
Doing an impression of, yep. That was a good impression. Everyone give us your impression of light.
Yeah.
And, they'll have it bounce off something that looks slightly inorganic, but you still know exactly what it is.
Sure.
And then we've talked about some miniature painters who paint that way, like Sergio Calvo, like Richard Gray, where they use intentionally uneven lines for highlights or for their edges or whatever. And when you look at the whole piece, it reads blended, it reads lit correct, but then you can see the imperfections up close.
Yeah.
But there's this so they were saying, like, why has smoothness become such a focal point in the miniature medium? And we have a couple of thoughts on that as well.
Yeah.
I think right now, for one, it's a movement. Like anything in art, it goes through phases.
Yeah.
And in miniature painting, we've endured, if you're as old as I am, a number of phases. A number of phases. Some were you just wanted to mimic box art. Others were you did sky, earth, and MM, which was like the not heavy metal like Games Workshop, but like the heavy metal animated movies and graphic novels.
Yeah, it's like blue on top, brown on the bottom. There's like a white zigzaggy line to be the
hyper contrast chrome bumper look.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we went through other ones where it was like colored metal or juicing, and then we went through people learning how to airbrush with stuff. So there's always phases, and some elements of those stick forever. But right now, you'll see, especially on social media, I don't see it as much in person, but on social media, models that are hyper smooth, hyper crisp, hyper clean, with zero ability to tell where one thing starts and one thing ends. And
in my opinion, a little bit hyper boring. I mean, like, honestly, I think the smoothness movement.
And it could just be a phase.
I think it's a phase.
In a couple of years, it might change.
I think we're pushing the limits of what can be smooth.
Yeah.
We've valued the smoothness because we've judged it as winning techniques at competitions, high level competitions, and people are trying to go and perfect it further and further, the smoothness. But I think it ends up being incredibly boring to look at.
It can be.
I think it ends up being so much work, and then I think it kind of breaks the realism a little bit. I think the reason we did smoothness initially is because we are working on a medium that is so tiny.
Yep.
Right? That it was like, it's impressive to make it look that smooth on such a small space. Right? And that was cool. That was impressive. I mean, it's the same reason why like water effects are in right now too. Because water effects, what was the other trend we saw? Blue side, red side.
Right.
Was a trend.
Two light sources.
Yeah. That was like, oh, this is neat that we don't realize we could do this before. Everyone, let's do it.
Right.
And I think the smoothness is like that, but it's a little like immersion breaking. It's like when you see a lady in a bikini in a magazine and she's airbrushed to hell.
Yep.
And it's like, at a certain point, you're like, this isn't attractive anymore.
No.
Because she looks fake. But that's part of what I think the smoothness on a model does, is you're trying to paint a miniature to look realistic, and then when you go too far past that realistic and make it too smooth, it's like, well, nothing in real life is smooth like this, actually.
Right.
Now it doesn't work anymore. Now I can tell it's fake. Same thing with art, right? Like when you were too good at painting portraits in, Elizabethan, times, people be like, nah, it's too realistic. Can you put some like humid, I want to tell it's paint, like put some brush strokes in there. Like it became a sort of a calling sign, a style. It became your signature. And it became a little like it was. You took pride in the fact that you could, like, when you looked it up close, it's like, oh, this is actually paint.
Yeah.
Like that kind of shows that it's like I don't know. It's like a maker's mark. It's like minting it. It's like you can tell that it's like, this isn't.
The illusion is almost more impressive than flawlessness.
Right.
And I think when it's like the first time I saw something done like that, and we have our questions, our skepticisms, if you will, about anything that's posted that looks perfectly smooth on social media, because because technology can edit it.
Also, when you see these things that are perfect on social media, and you're like, okay, well, which competition are they putting this in to win? Because if they submit that to any competition,
that's graded on technical
it's going to win every single one of them. Which one's it going to be in? And then they never get posted results-wise in any competition. And it makes you wonder. It's like, well, if you painted it that well, why are you not submitting it, for one?
Yeah.
And B, why are you not showing it in person ever? Well, I mean, the one of the things you immediately jump to is like, well, it's edited then. It's photoshopped.
Right.
It's filtered. There's something hinky going on with it.
Yep, software or hardware that modifies the look, and I don't want to think that way.
Right, me either. I honestly don't, and that's why I always have to point out the fact that whenever we see a really cool piece, we make sure to say, I also saw it in person.
Yeah,
and it is as good or better than it was in photos of whoever we're looking at. Right, like I know there are phone cameras suck sometimes. They just don't work sometimes.
Yeah.
They don't capture it. They don't get the contrast. They pick up too much texture because they're seeing through layers of paint and seeing contrast that's not that you don't see with the human eye.
Right.
There are all kinds of things like that, and the only real way to judge it is in person. So it's like I kind of want to see some of these models that I see online in person just to make sure that they exist. And if that's the level that they've actually been painted to, I want to see that in real life.
And you mentioned something before that when you see it over and over again, it can look a little boring.
Yeah.
Because when every square millimeter of the model is painted in that style and to that degree, it starts to look flat from top to bottom, believe it or not, despite the high contrast they tried to build into it. And then when you see some people going through the steps of how they're achieving it for those that actually show that part, it ends up looking less like art and more about the technical side, not technique, but the technical side. So it's like they're focused on like geometric patterns and measurements. Like I'm going to paint this line down a cylinder, and then I'm going to paint a smaller one down the cylinder, and then I'm going to paint half of the top of that smaller down the cylinder, and then I'm going to either glaze it all to blend it or use an airbrush to blend it so those lines disappear. And I really only did 3 layers to create a blend from brown to white. And so it's just a technical game of engineering or precision that instead of being art, which is supposed to be a little freer. Now there's no signature on it. You can't look at it and recognize it as paint, at least not in a photo. And so I think you're like you said, your brain starts to then actually see it as less real because you went no gold in real life is actually that smooth when you look at it. And so when someone asked that question and it went around everywhere, I saw everybody posting it on their stories. That why in other forms of art, but then the focus in miniatures has become this smooth thing. It's because I think they've taken the miniatures in some way out of art and they've turned it into just a technical process. They've turned it into sous vide instead of feeling how to cook.
I think it's just we haven't gotten there yet, right? We're in the hyper realistic clean phase at the moment.
Yeah,
I think we're going to value in the future because we're going to see the clean, smooth paint jobs are going to start losing to technically good but more realistic paint jobs
more
in the future.
Creative too.
Yeah. So I mean, battle damage and scratches, micro scratches, and like imperfections in a surface, and creating an imperfection perfectly, right? Making something imperfect perfectly is going to be more technically difficult and more technically impressive than just making something smooth, just making a smooth blend. Because you have to make the smooth blend first and then fuck it up. You have to break it up in order to like ruin your paint job. In order to make it look better. It's just interesting. And we've seen some of it, right? We've seen some of it already. Arrows and blood dripping and tears in cloth for like models that are like super impressive. I know there's tons of like barbarian busts and stuff I see online all the time where they're scarred and there's a specific dwarf that I can think of that I think it was a bust where he's got this gnarly reddish, warded nose, and it's like that's way more impressive than they would just made like beautiful skin on it. He needs to have wrinkles and blemishes and color variation in the skin.
Think of the like again on the art side instead of the technical side. Because you could focus on machine-like perfection and smoothness, but then that's what it looks like. It now doesn't have feeling. So I guess a way to relate to it, maybe for some people, is there are sometimes musicians that are talked about that way, where they can from a technical perspective on the piano,
Mhm.
play something technically perfect, but it lacks like a passion, or it lacks putting their own
Mhm.
touch on it, but staying within the measures and the time
Sure.
signature.
I mean, singing,
Yeah.
like there are micro things you can do with your voice where you like,
Where it's your own.
you push some feeling into it where you don't like, you're hitting the note, sure, but you're also like, you're putting a twist on there.
Yep.
That isn't represented in the page.
Yeah.
Like you're putting a personality thing, your voice is coming through in it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Painting, I think, like I said, I think is going to get there. I think it's going to be a lot harder to be clean in the future. I think we'll see it. We'll see a trend of just like all the submissions next year will all be exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, and
not clean anymore, just...
And while there's been clean things that have existed forever,
Mhm.
the like what breaks up the clean is a lot of times more visually interesting on a small space.
Yeah.
And
I'm thinking of a specific piece that won a Golden Demon. It might have been Best in Show, where it was amazing, technically amazing, because not only was it like 50% scratch built, but it was like it was just a visual joy. It was the high elf holding the helmet and the sword.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the model I'm talking about, where like the base is just base was award winning.
Yeah.
Let alone the model who was sculpted out of an existing like high elf noble from fantasy, and then given a brand new pose, and they sculpted the helmet and they gave him all kinds of new stuff. An amazing model, but clean.
Yep.
Almost too clean. And like I said, like that, I think that was a couple of years ago, but that was a step towards this.
Yep.
Favoring clean precision over art. Because some people are still trying to do it. I mean, we think of a particular painter who does lots of blue and purple swirls on all of her models, and like that's art, right?
It is, yeah.
But it wasn't maybe not submitted for the right competition, and so sometimes that's we've talked about that too. Is painting for the competition, not for yourself. A lot of times, unfortunately, you have to know what the criteria is. You know what they're looking for. Unfortunately, Golden Demon is a little favored on the technically perfect side of it, less on the art side. You had submitted a piece where you had done a rough cloth on the back of a cloak,
mm-hmm.
and they were confused why you did that.
Right.
Like that was one of your critiques. It was like, we loved your piece. We don't think it should have been in diorama because it was too small. Maybe it should have been in single, but we were confused about why you did this. And you're like, well, cloth isn't perfect, especially someone living in a fucking sewer.
Yep.
It's not going to be perfectly smooth and silky.
Yeah.
I did it to create texture in like a roughed up kind of cloth cloak. And they're like, oh, okay.
Well, and
like it's...
They'll like texture on a cloak but you have to do it so much more minute than that.
Right.
And now, again, there's an art appreciation at something like the Golden Demon, but
mm-hmm.
that aside, the visual aspect of looking at these miniatures that are now hyper smooth, and once it starts, now everyone's doing that. Here's my version of it,
mm-hmm.
where I do stair-step blends in a particular technical order, stair-step pattern rather, and then a blend in a technical order. But it is too perfect in the sense that you're still trying to show a piece that you've put on a base that's supposed to represent a battlefield, yet there's nothing about that model that shows it's ever set foot on a battlefield.
Right.
And why is every surface? Why is the leather shiny and smooth? Why is the skin shiny and smooth, and the metal and the feathers and why is all that stuff?
No, I can see if it was a specific story you were trying to tell, it would make sense.
Yep.
Like a high elf, right? Sure,
Yep.
Everything's smooth and clean on high elf.
Ethereal materials from millions of years ago.
Fine.
Yeah.
But like, if it were a Skaven, you can't make that clean and smooth in every single aspect. It's like, the dude's never seen anything but a sewer or underground.
Yep.
Like, you can't make him clean. And if you try to, you're messing it up.
Yeah, or have his filth be done in a clean way, sure. But still executed in a way that makes sense. And I think when everyone starts mimicking that style, we lose everyone's signature. Mm-hmm. Now it's just everyone's doing that.
Yeah. And like I said, usually we'll see it. It's like the winner of a competition will do that.
People, yeah.
It'll inspire people in the next year afterwards. 1 million submissions are that imitation of that last year's Golden Demon.
Yeah.
We'll see that all the time. And it's like, okay, well, you're just like chasing a trend.
Yep.
You're not like wowing them with something new that they haven't seen before.
Yeah, and it's, at least if you're going to take it and be inspired by it, come up with your version of it.
Right.
Come up, or if you come up with something brand new, that's hard. I get it. Being creative, is writer's block for everybody.
Yep.
You sit there and stare at the miniature, and you stare at color theory, and you just are like, what am I going to do to make this unique? But if you do take an idea like that, make it your own, and don't just copy it.
Yeah.
Try to make it your own.
Well, I think it's funny is every year, especially at like Golden Demon, the same type of thing does not win the Slayer Sword every time.
No.
Like it's so different. Because we had that one. I think that was a Slayer Sword winner.
I don't think it was here though.
No, it wasn't here.
No.
I think it was in Europe. But it was a winner, at least a gold. We had the skink with the spear that got golden.
Yep.
Gold. It's Slayer Sword too.
Slayer Sword.
And then last year it was
Lazarus
the Lazarus, and then wasn't the Mega Gargant,
the Kraken Eater.
The Kraken Eater. So like they're just so different in terms of like what was the winner.
Yeah.
You know, the only common thing is it's like this is a unique, personalized, emotion. Like you can tell the artist was feeling it,
and there is technical cleanliness in it.
Yeah.
But within the context of the model, and that's what I love about seeing them in person.
For sure.
Is then you can see what the artist put into it. Whereas pictures of perfect, what almost looks like Photoshop things, after a while I'm just like, oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, okay. Especially when you see it week after week. It's like, do something new.
Yeah.
Oh, you're showing the leg here? Well, I'm sure the rest of the model will be the exact same.
Yeah, go into the
something else.
Go into the kitchen. Don't look at anything else. Look at what ingredients you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Make something happen.
Yeah. Speaking of, I think I could make something now.
We got stuff in the kitchen?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Let's see. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed. Check out our new episodes every Friday on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible, or on Podbean. You can also follow myself and Llama on Instagram for more. We are at Hyena Paints Minis and at Llama Paints Minis. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. And as always, we'll catch you next time.